Today we've got the most perfect day, and I want to demonstrate to you today how we're going to use this very simple and quite reasonably priced piece of equipment to turn these two larch logs into some usable 4x4 pieces of timber. So today I'm going to make myself a proper milling bench, and for that I need two fence posts. Now I don't happen to have any fence posts, so I'm going to make some. So the first thing I'm going to do is to point these two posts, put them into the ground about 7 feet apart, and they'll make a perfect bench for our saw logs. And 7 foot is just there. Now that is ideal. Now the reason I made these fence posts only 4 inches wide is we're going to try and make a 4-inch cut on this log on top. So I don't want these fence posts underneath to be any wider than 4 inches. Now I've got my log nicely level on the 2 milling stands. I've also taken a slice off there just to make the top roughly level. I'm now going to screw it in with these 2 timber screws just to keep it nice and secure. That's perfect. It's not going anywhere. Really solid, really safe. The next thing I'm going to do is to get our milling guide. Now all I'm using for a milling guide is a very simple piece of 4x2 you can get from any timber merchant. But the important thing you have to check with any timber that you use as a milling guide is that it's absolutely square and straight and has no twists in it. Ideally there should be some wood left over on either side so that when I mill it's going to leave a nice square edge. The next thing I'm going to do is screw the guide to the top of the log. So I've got my spirit level here. That's really quite close. That looks really good actually. So I'll screw this end in here. Perfect. Make sure that the screw is flush with the surface. You don't want to catch it on the mill when you go past. That looks just about right. Just before I put the mill onto the saw, I want to check that it actually fits on this rail. It's adjustable by means of these 2 thumb screws here. So just check. At the moment it's too narrow, so it's much easier to change it now than it is when it's on the saw. So I'll undo these 2 thumb screws and move out this rail. Oh, there's a bit of a blockage there. That's better. There we are, that's perfect. So I'll do this up now, nice and tight. I'll just poke the saw down through the guide here, and then I can nip up the sawmill just using my fingers here, and then it's handy that I can just use the normal chainsaw spanner to drop these nuts. Very important to do these nuts up nice and tight. And if you don't, the saw will slide in the mounting when you're moving it. Another good habit is to check that the saw is long enough to go through the log, and also that it's not going to foul your support post here. Remember, I put a metal screw in the side here. I really don't want to hit that. That's great. It's going to miss the post as far as I can tell. Now we can see what sort of result we've got from this first milling cut. You can see that's a lovely straight cut. Now what I'm going to do is simply run the saw along the other side, and we'll have two parallel slices. If you look here, you can see that the sawmill cuts about 5mm away from the guide. So by the time I've cut on the other side of the guide, I have a piece of timber that is 10mm wider than the guide we put on top. Now you can see the two parallel surfaces that are milled. It's not bad. You can see this log that I've chosen is only just going to make a 4x4, just because of the wiggles in it. But it's quite a characterful piece of wood, and you can certainly do something with it, even if it has got a few little bits of bark showing. The next thing to do is to remove the guide plank and then turn our beam through 90 degrees. Then I put the guide plank back on. It's going to be much easier to see now where I've got to put it to get the best out of the log. Now we have the guide rail back on again, we're ready for our last two milling cuts. And at the end of this we should have a lovely 4x4 beam. I love it. Now we're taking the fourth cut. We've got a lovely square 4x4 beam that can be used for rustic building. This is something I've got a passion for. It's fantastic to use just simple equipment, quite reasonably priced equipment, to go out into the woods, get yourself some perfectly usable building timber and build yourself a rustic shack in your own land. There we have it. Beautiful square piece of timber. You can see there's some bark showing in places, but I think it just adds to the character. Certainly, this is perfectly usable as a piece of rustic building timber. And actually, the surface finish is really, really good. Lovely and smooth. Couldn't you just imagine that as an upright for your tiny house in the woods? And that's going nowhere. What a fantastic bit of building timber. Very, very proud of that. The other thing about doing your own milling is you get a connection with the wood. You fell your own tree, you mill your own timber out of that tree, and then when you make a shelter out of it, it's a fantastic feeling. Really, really good. Happy with that. Time for part two. Let's see what happens with this next log. Just for interest's sake, I'm now going to try using this mill using a much smaller saw, and then halfway down this cut I'm going to take it off again. I'm going to put the 100cc Stihl on and see how much difference it makes. What I'm interested in is to make sure that people with the cheaper saws can have a go at milling, as well as those with the professional forestry saws. So I really hope that using the small, quite cheap Stihl is actually going to work well. So here goes. to say that was a real surprise. This saw is getting on for, I don't know, 2/3 of the power of the one I used before, maybe even less than that. And because it has a really sharp chain on it, the cut wasn't any different at all. I couldn't really tell the difference. So it just goes to show you can use a smaller, cheaper, less powerful saw as long as your chain is super sharp. It's done a great job. If you come and have a look around this side, you can see that the cut that it's made is every bit as good as the other saw. That's a real surprise. That's a very good result. Just to complete the test, we're going to now try doing another run using the bigger saw. So the first time we used a 52cc saw, the second time a 35cc saw. Now we're going to run it with the 100cc saw and see if it makes an appreciable difference. Well, I'd say that's pretty significant. That really does fly through it. But hey, you'd hope that spending an awful lot more on a saw would make a difference. Probably about 4 times faster. There you go, that's what you'd expect. So to recap, the first saw was a Husqvarna 353, did a single cut in 4 minutes dead. The second saw was a Stihl MS 210, did the same single cut in 4 minutes and 10 seconds. And the third saw was a Stihl MS 660, modified with a 100cc engine, did a single cut in 2 minutes flat. So you can see the big saw was actually twice as fast as the smallest. There we have it, another 4x4 beam. That was an awful lot faster using the bigger saw. And pretty soon we're going to have enough to make ourselves a little rustic shelter in the woods. Fantastic. I've really enjoyed doing the little milling session here today. I hope you've enjoyed it as well. We've managed to produce some fantastic, good quality square timber using this very simple milling jig. And we've also managed to compare 3 different sizes of saw. This big one behind me and the other 2 smaller ones. What we found out from that is probably the most important thing is to have a sharp chain. It also shows that you don't need a massive chainsaw to produce the same result. Although if you do have a smaller chainsaw, it's probably a good idea to be going for 3x3 timbers instead of 4x4s, but that's fine. You can produce a really strong rustic structure out of 3x3 timbers. They don't necessarily have to be 4x4s like this. Here on Chainsaw Shack, we've done loads of other videos. Some are about maintenance, some are about the practical side of things. If you want to watch another video, just click the rectangular button here. And if you want to see more as we do them, click the round button to subscribe. Thank you very much for joining me here today, and I'll see you on the next video.